Hi, welcome Dr. Aron Choi to this week's episode of the Genetic Genius Podcast.
Hi, Dr. Lulu. I'm very excited to reconnect with you here on your awesome podcast.
Yay, I know it's been way too long. It's funny to connect this way virtually. I miss you, big virtual hug. Before we get into our amazing conversation today, I would just love for our listeners to hear a little bit about you and your background and just kind of what makes you tick.
Well, I am a classmate. We were classmates in naturopathic medical school. So I'm a naturopathic physician by training. I live in Seattle, Washington. I love wellness and health, and I always wanted to, one, ensure that I knew how to be healthy myself and for my family, and that just extended into a rabbit hole of going to medical school, continuing to do a lot of continuing education, self-study, self-experimentation. So I'm just fascinated by how the body works and how to really live our best life. Because I think without health, we don't really have anything else. And health is the engine that helps us do lots of other things. So that's what I'm passionate about.
That's right. I love that. Yeah, it's like really what fuels your engine, and that's your passion for helping people feel so good, which is so true to my heart as well. And how you said your family is important, and what's the kind of like the story about how you got inspired to be this amazing doctor that you are?
Oh, well, thank you. You're making me blush.
Of course.
Well, if I go back to it, I didn't expect to go to medical school. I thought I would be either take over my dad's tax practice, become a real estate agent. Yeah, and as I went through that, I actually started working in Silicon Valley at a startup in online marketing. Running those little Google ads, those sponsored ads,
yeah.
doing that at an enterprise level. And I didn't really experience a ton of fulfillment doing that for maybe dating sites or insurance sites.
Right.
And so when I got laid off around in 2008, my grandma was also going through health things. She was towards the end of her life. So I was visiting her in the hospital a lot. And I remember one day she was sitting at Thanksgiving and she was kind of turned into a little bit of a zombie. And I was like, she was sitting there with, saliva coming out the side of her mouth. She was repeating things and just that dementia picture. And I didn't know what to call it. I think my mom's a pharmacist, and so I knew a little bit, but didn't know why.
Yeah.
And as I saw her and I visited her in the hospitals and understanding that she was on these, now I know she was on statins, cholesterol medications, blood pressure medications, acid blocker medications for acid reflux. Yeah, the very typical list we see. And now looking back, I always wondered, why did she already had 2 or 3 minor strokes and heart attacks. What's a statin going to do? And now we actually know that the statins contribute to dementia. The acid blockers contribute to malabsorption of nutrients, which affects your brain. So now looking back, I can see why. That it really sparked something in me to start looking for answers. How do we stay healthy? How do we address the root cause, as we talk about a lot? How do we align ourselves with nature? And so that was probably one of the biggest turning points. I won't go into my own stuff, but that was kind of the main motivation. I want to be able to do more for my relatives, for my family, myself, my friends. And so that's how I went down the path of studying naturopathic medicine versus going to pharmacy school or
a more natural course. Yeah. And I think, for a lot of us to become naturopathic physicians, it's so true that that's kind of what we want to do. We just want to help people feel better, but from a really good place, and looking at it from that root cause, as you said, is so key to our whole practice. And so let's dive into some of our fun topics we're going to talk about today. First, I love to talk about metabolism. I'm so excited that you want to talk about this today because it's such a great, all-encompassing cellular talk discussion. So first of all, can you just tell our listeners, what is metabolism?
Yeah, it took me probably a while to really be able to explain it, or even to understand it myself, because metabolism we'll hear people say I have fast metabolism, I have slow metabolism. When we hear metabolism, we think, oh, it makes me gain weight, or it prevents me from gaining muscle, like something's up with my metabolism. When I actually looked up the definition, metabolism is any biochemical process that keeps you alive. So
Really?
I was like, oh, so it's like, oh, that's actually like everything.
Right.
How we produce hormones, how we respond to hormones, how we detoxify, our immune function, you know, everything that our body is doing now to keep us alive is metabolism.
Even when we're sleeping.
Even when,
still
I
metabolizing.
think especially while we're sleeping,
Yeah.
I'm finding out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So that's our basics of metabolism. And then how does that affect like the physiology of the cells? So we're talking about like all the different functions of the body. And then we know that it affects, as you said, all the different pieces of our puzzle, of our great big body puzzle. So how does it affect like the basic cellular function? And my like bigger question, I guess, there is, how does then, if say the body is in this kind of state of disease or dysfunction, what's happening to that cell deep in the cell when the metabolism starts to go wacky or awry?
Yeah, a lot of things, right? We know that cells are the building blocks for our bodies, like our skin. Our cells are like the little machines that do the work.
Yeah.
And so when I think of the cell, what can go wrong with the cell? A lot of people might be able to relate to the problem with, you know, diabetes, blood sugar dysregulation. You know, your blood sugar is too high. You might hear the term insulin resistance. That means, so at the cellular level, the cell isn't responding to signals the right way, or the cell is having trouble processing things like nutrients or different molecules to help make energy or to
Right.
detoxify. So if your cells aren't working, then a lot of things you'll feel that. You'll feel low energy. You might have trouble losing weight, feeling toxic, you know, having trouble getting rid of toxins from our environment. So a lot of different things, brain fog, you know.
Right. So
So
many different aspects.
yeah. So I try to tie it back to really what do people experience? And, you know, these are things I've experienced myself, which is
Right.
why I'm like so fascinated by it. Like, which levers do we pull to help our,
Sorry.
oh, no worries.
It was a crystal. I had in my head, I dropped one. Sorry.
We're just breaking the podcast.
Right. I was grounding, but then I dropped it. So I'm still okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
At a cellular level, the crystals aren't lining up.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think when I think of it, how do we optimize cellular function? We can't think about it. So maybe we'll get into this.
Right.
But as long as we know that we're trying to affect how the cells work, but then what do we do to get them to work, right? That's a question. You go in there and say, hey, Mr. Cell,
right. You're like,
not
wake up in there.
you're not performing up to snuff, you know, wake up or calm down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because the neurotransmitters have so many different methods of communication, right? And so I think that's what you were saying is, you know, like, is the cell communicating to the rest of the body about its function? And then how do we know if the cell is having the right communication? And then I think another thing you were saying was in that process of the cell, as it becomes, I don't know, loaded with toxins, the actual function of the cell starts to decrease. So then that's kind of how you would start to have, like you were saying, with insulin resistance, some of those communications start to break down within the cellular matrix or within the cells themselves.
Yeah. And like what toxins are destroying even the DNA or changing how the genes, if we're talking about genes, how does the environment affect how our genes express? And then it's like the blueprint. How is the interpretation of the blueprint getting turning into like the house that we're building? Is it going to turn into a shack with doors missing?
Right.
Or the paint's not matching. That's I like analogies, so I might throw out analogies out there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Especially for the listeners, I think when we're talking about the cell function and in relationship to genetics, it can be kind of a lot to understand and to grasp. So any analogies are always so helpful.
Yep, even for doctors, right?
Totally.
I'm not afraid to admit that when it comes to genetics, it's a big, it can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, we're still learning so much. I mean, our bodies are
Exactly.
complicated, but not at the same time. When we talk
We'll
about
get
the
to
foundation,
that, I'm
right?
sure.
Yeah, don't worry. Okay, so we talked about like the function of the cells, and really, when we're talking about metabolism, all the functions and making sure that the body is functioning properly. So, how do you then? Okay, say for instance, someone's coming to see you. They have a specific aspect that you've decided their metabolism is not working. So how do what kind of things do the patients or kind of listeners understand about that next step? So okay, let's just pick one thing we can go on our trail of analysis,
Mm,
so to speak. Let's say their digestive system, or you can pick, I'll let you pick. Let's just pick a system that's out of balance in regards to the metabolism, and then how do they boost that metabolism to get it back on track?
mm, that's a great question. I've going right out of school, did a lot of visceral manipulation, like manual
Mm-hmm.
work. Then I
Yeah.
discovered functional testing, like how do we look at someone's poo and
Right,
like
exactly.
what does that tell me about their metabolism, or running different blood tests, urine tests. So usually if someone comes to me, it's never just like one thing, right? There's
Right.
one thing they come to you with, but then you see the connection. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
talking like digestive issues, I work with a lot of people with whether it's chronic gas or bloating, acid
Mm-hmm.
reflux, some worse things like uh, IBS or inflammatory bowel disease,
Mm-hmm.
Crohn's
Yeah.
disease. And I always start with one, trying to understand what is the picture that created this diagnosis, this label.
Right. The
Who gave
label.
them the
Mm,
label? Like
right.
why did they get the label?
Is it a
Um,
true label?
is it actually what we're dealing with? So I'm always
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what that what is a symptom picture, how does it play into, what's the context of their life look like,
Mm-hmm.
as naturopaths, what's your diet look like, what's your sleep look like, stress, spirit,
Right.
work, relationships. And so from that point I might decide to like look at a lab test to get more information. I think the first thing is
Mm-hmm.
understanding, trying to figure out what are some of the possible root causes
Right.
of the symptom,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
not just saying, hey, you have inflammatory bowel disease, here's XYZ supplement,
See you
and then
later.
see you later.
Right.
Or
That's not how we work.
here's a diet,
Yeah.
go do it, go figure it out.
Right. And so many people are given that too. It's like, this is going to change your life. And then they're not given the
Yeah.
rest of the story.
Yeah. And I'll say I've learned from experience because I've done that before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe not being aware of how context is so important, how metabolism is all tied together. Like our metabolism is affected by our gut.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not directly. People might not see like how does losing weight or having trouble losing weight related to my gut? How does my skin issue like eczema related to my gut? How
Mm-hmm.
is like whatever autoimmune thing is going on? How's that related to my gut
Or
and
the
my
emotional
energy?
layer too. Mm-hmm.
Emotional, yeah,
Yeah.
neurotransmitters. Why is my depression or anxiety related to my gut?
Mm-hmm.
So going back to that question, it's how do we start evaluating is one, getting the whole picture, taking a good history, and being a detective is
Right.
how I start to think about it.
Yeah, I tell all my patients that I love being the detective, and we have to be, as you know, I mean, not all patients come in that are complicated, listeners out there, but we
Thank God.
do, yeah, thank God, right? But we do get a lot of cases where patients have gone to see another practitioner or physician, and they'll come in with like a long list of things that are out of balance, and then we really have to put on those thinking caps. Like, hey, how did you get to this place? And that, from that functional medicine perspective, like the timeline, like when did it start? How did it happen? So from metabolism, like, when did your body start having this dysfunction? Was it when you lost your job, or was it when you started eating this strange food? So many different reasons.
Yeah, did you go drink some lake water somewhere?
Right, exactly. Were you camping? Yeah. Okay, so sounds like there's a lot of different variables to deciding kind of that root cause of the dysfunction of the metabolism. So then, how does the reset work? Let's say, for instance, this person has a digestive issue. Let's just say IBS, and then the resetting. What does that look like? You mentioned diet a little bit, but I know there's lots of other key factors to that.
Yeah, I run. You've probably run into clients or even yourself if you're listening to this, thinking that the diet is the main factor. I've learned it's like diet and what you eat is an important factor. But if we think of a pie, it might be maybe 25% of that pie, maybe even sometimes as small as 10%. And you're like, what's the rest of that pie look like? What else do we have to address? And we know, and I don't know if you know Dr. Sachin Panda's work. He talks about
Oh yeah, I have
circadian rhythms.
the book right here on my desk.
So as I've learned from people like researchers like that, and even in our training, we talk about the determinants of health. What are the things that you need to put in place what's a recipe for health? And so the reset that I do with people, we do start with how and what to eat, right? A lot of people have tried different things, but they need some type of framework for deciding what to eat, when to eat, how to eat.
Right. The how is important, right?
Yeah, how to eat is very important. So then we start looking at what else affects digestion and metabolism. That's like, are you sleeping? When are you sleeping? When are you eating? Are you getting daylight? Are you like an artificial night owl where you're just blasted by it? You have like a monitor, like 5 monitors, your programmer, whatever it might be, that's mimicking the sun all the time, or even like indoor lighting, the fluorescent lighting. So we're thinking about how do we align ourselves with the natural rhythms of night and day. And I've even experienced this myself. Like once I've got more aligned with night and day, putting on my blue blocking glasses in the evening to block some of that blue light, I didn't have to try as hard with what to eat. Like,
oh, nice.
And I think a lot of my clients who kind of put this into practice, like if I make a habit to go outside first thing in the morning, get some sunlight on my face and my skin once or twice throughout the day, shutting things down in the evening, then the what to eat becomes more effective. Like someone can eat a perfect diet and still experience a lot of digestive issues. And that was very confusing to me. Sometimes they get more anxious because they feel so restricted. And I'm like, if they're eating the perfect diet, why are they
still having all these symptoms?
Like, yeah, exactly. So it's like we have to address the whole pie, not just one slice of it.
One slice. Yeah, and I think you hit the key word there is restriction. It's interesting because, I think a lot of the philosophy that people hear about, I don't know, I guess you could say alternative medicine or seeing a practitioner for a nutritional aspect is that possibly I'm not going to be able to eat anything else. You're going to eliminate everything that I love. And so I say to my patients, well, how can that make you happy if you're not eating anything that you like? Okay, I'm on this diet of, I don't know, would be an example, just like potatoes and peas or something, and so it doesn't, if you're not making yourself happy, you're not going to be compliant, and then you're definitely not going to feel better.
And definitely it's not going to stick, right?
Right, not going to stick. You'll be like, well, I tried that for about 2 days and that was horrible. Yeah, so I think restriction can totally backfire.
Yeah, and if another big piece of the metabolism puzzle is stress, and not just like the obvious stress, but I've seen people really stressed, like anxious about food. I had a client who had digestive issues, acid reflux, and she was following like both the low FODMAP diet and like the low lectin diet. So if you see where they overlap, she was like, so what are you eating? She's like, well, I'm eating these 7 foods. And once she put a number on like number of what she was allowed to eat, I'm like, something is not Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
some
this
that
is
is
not
not right.
working
That's
for you.
not healthy, and I think the other philosophy of like the rainbow of foods. I mean, of course, I know that sometimes we have to eliminate things that can be triggers, right? And then
Right.
heal the gut. But if we're not eating the rainbow in the spectrum, how can we get the nutrients into the cells? Those poor little cells will be dried up like little prunes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you start being afraid to eat like a
Mm-hmm.
tomato, which you
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, tomatoes are high in lectins. I'm like, well, I mean, you have to learn how to prepare it properly. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
to eat salsa all day, you know.
Right. Salsa
But I don't
diet.
want someone to be afraid of a cucumber or afraid of an eggplant or afraid of a
Yeah.
tomato, because that fear changes how you digest. It changes your hormones, your neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm.
So it just backfires. So I think I've
Yeah.
tried to go away from the you got to follow this diet type of very prescriptive, rule based eating,
Mm-hmm.
and try to help people be more intuitive.
Right. Yeah. Listen to their body.
Huh. It's
Yeah. What
tricky
would
though.
that
I
be
got to say,
like? I
yeah,
know.
it
I
takes a
might
little
have
time to
to
get
turn it
there.
down.
Yeah,
Wait, not so many messages all at once.
exactly.
Can you text me?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes I'll get questions like, "Can I eat this?" and like a picture. Like,
Right.
like I don't want to be the food police or the
Right.
food traffic controller or whatever it might
Hmm.
be. So
Yeah.
it is tricky to balance. Like we need guidelines, but not like restriction.
Yeah. I
So kind of
think.
where does it meet
Mhm.
in the middle is I think a challenge.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the nail on the head, so to speak, when you said the fear part of it too. I think, that is just, I mean, even we're talking about just health in general, when the patient goes into the fear, you were talking about labeling, and when they get labeled with a specific diagnosis, sometimes it can help us to steer the ship, but other times it can be such a hindrance to their road to health.
Right. We've seen it with genetic testing. Like I use genetic testing, but I'm also very careful. Like,
Hmm.
oh, you got this gene,
Right, watch
it's
out.
game over, you know.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
all in context. So that
Hmm.
I think it's important to understand the context around the thing that we're prescribing and the
Hmm.
reasoning. Like, how do we use it, not how do we own a label and become it. Like you're the MTHFR gene. Like,
Right.
oh no, or you
Yeah.
are like, I don't know. I can't. Someone's doing a low histamine diet. You become like the low histamine person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And everything you do then becomes geared around that. Yeah. And that can
Right.
be really, like you said, restrictive for patients when they're, I always talk to them about like, how can we open the door? How can we open your doorway to be more receptive to those things around you that are helping you feel better? So maybe that's a good segue kind of into our next mode of conversation. What do you, let's talk, I want to talk about like the fix it and don't fix it model, so to speak.
Hmm.
Because, I think what I was thinking about you earlier today as I was prepping for our little discussion, and I think the fix it and don't fix it model is really key for listeners because I'm broken,
Mm.
and what do you think about that? How do patients get stuck in that loop of not feeling good? I'm stuck. I'm broken, and then how do we get them out of that? And listeners into this place of feeling like it's okay where I am.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm just thinking back to school when we're as new clinicians, baby clinicians, you're like,
Hmm.
you got this. I want to get rid of it for you.
Right?
You got
Yeah,
pain. We're gonna fix it.
we're gonna fix you.
You got stress. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it. And over time, uh, you realize that telling someone, like having feeling, I think if we think, I try to say this in my own words, like if I don't want to feel broken. And the thing is,
Hmm.
humans aren't broken.
Right.
Everything that happens, it happens for a reason, whether that's an illness, not feeling good. So once you realize this is nature playing, this is the way nature is working. It's
Hmm.
not that nature is broken. Nature and biology works a certain way as it's supposed to. So I'll use my own experience with like eczema. So dealing with eczema, it's not that it sucks to have like itchy, scaly, bleeding skin. But once I realize, oh, there's something that's creating this condition, that, you know, this eczema, it's not that it needs to be fixed, but what do I need to remove? We in naturopathic medicine, we want to remove the obstacle to healing, to cure. And so once I started, oh, I'm supposed to, like, eczema is here for a reason. How do I think back? How do I reverse engineer it so I can remove the thing that's causing it? And the eczema will go away.
Right.
So our symptoms are a message from our body. And if we think of them as messages, not the enemy,
Right.
then you start thinking there's nothing to fix. Like, this is supposed to happen. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. We're
I
not
don't want
saying
to
that.
diminish that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, being sick does suck to a certain,
Right.
like, there's some suffering there. But we don't have to attach more suffering than needed, right? There's nothing to fix.
Right.
It's just, how do we make adjustments to let nature create a better condition for us? That's how I think about it.
Yeah. How do we bring our bodies back into alignment? Because it's really, you know, we're just kind of got steered off the path, or something affected our vibrational state, you know, and that can be physical, mental, emotional body. And so then how do we turn the switch on so that we're hearing the message, like we were saying before, from the body more clearly? So like, hey, you don't have to fix me, but what if we did this a little differently?
Yeah. I like that you mentioned vibration, because another thing I've noticed with patterns in clients, those who suffered the most or had the most challenge kind of getting back on track were people who use the labels or the words frequently. Like, I have a client who seemed to be dealing with a lot of stress related things. And I remember sitting there at one appointment and she was like, I'm so stressed. I'm so stressed about this. I'm so stressed about that. Like, every other word was, I'm stressed. I'm stressed. And what happens when you say, I'm stressed? You're
you are
like,
stressed.
You are stressed. You start believing it. Your body's like, oh, I'm stressed. I better act like I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
When we're stressed out, our metabolism does very different things. It raises
Totally.
our cortisol. It
Yeah.
doesn't digest food well. You know, we get tension in our muscles. And she had digestive issues and severe tension in her muscles. And, you know, I mean, there was some other stuff that we could have kind of dug into lab wise, and
Right.
but I just noticed she was saying, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed. So when we say, I have IBS, I have IBS, I have IBS, you become it, and you almost like make it grow.
Yeah, you totally manifest
my
it.
thyroid's broken. My thyroid's broken. My thyroid, like, yeah, you keep telling yourself that it's not going to make it better.
It's going to happen over and over again.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And our words are powerful, just like our thoughts. You know, I was just listening to this, I meditate, and I was listening to this little, not a podcast, just a meditation. Anyway, and so one of the things it was saying was that, you know, when you go to sleep, to change your thought pattern is to have, so, you know, sometimes if we go to sleep, we say, oh, my day is going to be horrible tomorrow because I don't feel good, something like that. Or, you know, if you can change the thought process when you go to sleep, then you wake up with a different, you know, people say, oh, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today. It's because they went to sleep on the wrong side of the bed.
Like, so, figuratively, with the wrong thoughts in your head, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it is all about the vibration and the energy of the thought that can shift, but sometimes it takes a lot to break the loop.
Right.
Know, that thought process.
I'm curious what you might say to someone with the fix it or don't fix it kind of
mindset.
What's your mindset around that?
Yeah. So usually when I'll have them create a new thought process. So let's say, for instance, you were saying, you know, like, I'm stressed is the break. So then every time, it's almost like, do you know Cesar Millan? Do you remember him, the dog whisperer?
I remember, like, I'm the alpha.
Right. So, but he said you had to create like a distraction technique for the dog to be able to think about something else. So what I tell patients is create a distraction technique for your brain. So when you say I'm stressed, then immediately do something to create the distraction, like something healthy, like go outside, like you said, sit into the sun, and then create a new thought process. So every time then that old thought pattern comes up, you have the new thought pattern come in, and it creates it, just like, our cells are regrowing and changing every 90 days. All we have to do is rechange that thought process. And of course, it's not always easy, especially if it's one we've had for a long time. So that's usually how I help patients in the beginning, is just create a new tape loop. That's what I tell them, like that new tape loop in your mind where, I'm calm. I am breathing, as you know, it's like great to work with the breath work. So sometimes even that, creating that new thought pattern in the breath loop pattern can really help too.
Yeah. That reminds me of even changing the environment, like even just recognizing that it's a thought loop is like a huge step, because my client who kept talking about stress, well, she didn't even realize those words are coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
And so, like if I feel like crap, there's usually certain times a day, like first thing in the morning, I'm not like the most chipper person
You're not
getting out of bed.
I don't believe you.
Yeah. But it's like, I recognize that I'm feeling kind of like, ugh, today.
Right.
But I know that if I go outside, it kind of like changes my state. So I don't even judge the fact that I may have got out of bed on the wrong, out of bed on the wrong side. How's
Yeah,
that work?
right. Yeah, how it works.
That thing. I know that if certain behaviors will change the thought pattern. So if that helps anyone, I think of the behavior I will do if I feel a certain way. And so that's another tool that I use, and I think I help my clients kind of like find their thing.
Right. Yeah, what
To
works
just
for
like
them.
break that pattern.
Yeah. And we have so many different patterns that we've been doing since we were, born from our parents. So it's going to be harder ones to break sometimes.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're talking about the fix, don't fix it model. And I want to talk a little bit about suppression. So you have, let's say you have a patient or a client come in and they've been taking, like you were talking about, different pharmaceuticals. It could also be a supplement as well. Doesn't have to be a pharmaceutical, but that has then suppressed their illness or state of disease even further into the cells. So how do you work with the patient to then get them out of that like suppressed state? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like steroids are
a
very common, especially like in any autoimmune condition. Someone's gonna be on like a painkiller and some type of immune suppressant, like a steroid or a biologic. And it is tough if someone's been on a medication for a long time.
Like Synthroid is a common one too.
Yeah, Synthroid. Someone having fevers might just have a habit of taking a Tylenol or Advil to lower the fever. And so, like, the way I think about suppression is blocking the body's natural way of dealing with the problem. So again, it goes back to the symptoms mean something. It's like your body's trying to heal.
Right.
I know we've learned that fever is a good thing, which is, I think, a very different way of thinking about a fever from a conventional model. Like, if you have a fever, yes, it might mean you're dealing with an infection, but the fever is treated like the problem. So what do you do if the fever is the problem? You knock it down. You take an Advil, take a Tylenol, whatever it might be. In our model, the naturopathic model, how do we manage the fever so that this is the thing that someone needs to go through to deal with an infection?
Right.
So I'm always thinking like that. Like, if someone's been suppressed, how do we start moving towards the healing process? Because the suppression the symptom is often the healing process that someone needs to go through. But just so we know, like, you have to, if someone's been on something like a steroid or for a long time, you need to wean them off slowly, because there could be issues. But I'm always thinking, how do we go through the healing process and not like avoid the healing process?
Yeah,
And
oh,
sometimes
sorry.
it's very gradual. Sometimes it has to be
Mhm.
very like slow.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to ask about that too. And, with, we're talking about the fix it, don't fix it model, so to speak, and suppression, the healing and igniting, as you were talking about, that innate ability to heal ourselves doesn't necessarily happen overnight. And when we're talking about suppression, it could have been suppressed for a really long time. And we actually don't want to turn on the switch to full volume overnight, because then you could have a lot of other old symptoms surface, right?
Yeah. Or I
Hmm.
think heavy metals kind of pop to my mind. Like if
Yeah.
someone has been told you have mercury issues or lead
Hmm.
issues, and then you go through this crazy protocol, this chelation protocol to remove all that lead and mercury in your blood all at one time, oftentimes people suffer because
Yeah.
all that all the toxins that were sequestered somewhere nice and safely in a closet in your
Right.
cells
Don't
somewhere.
open the closet.
Yeah, imagine you open all the closet doors at once and all
Hmm.
that stuff goes into your system, and we aren't able to handle that toxic load all at once, and then you end up having to do a lot of cleanup. It can actually
Hmm.
cause more problems if you rush it.
Right.
So it takes it's both an art and a science to like know how long someone's been dealing with something, and if you can open up the valve a little bit
Right.
more.
How much can you turn it open?
Yeah, you don't want to turn it on blast right away.
Hmm. Yeah, I always tell my patients that, healing and working with me is a marathon, not a sprint. It's like, we want to go through the process, through not that the healing is a long haul, so to speak, but that it is a road that we want to take the time in, because we don't want to miss an important part of the journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Take the
healing,
view in, right?
yeah, take the view,
This is a road trip.
smell the flowers, enjoy it. I mean, like you were saying, we're not disqualifying the suffering of illness, but when you going through that phase of illness and healing, there's all these different, um, roses that come
Roses
up.
and there's
Yeah.
thorns too.
Yeah, too.
You got to
Thorns
watch.
and roses and buds. And like you said, like the waves, you got to have that, or you don't appreciate. And you look back, I'm sure you have work with patients who say you have to remind them what they experienced. You've been working with them for a year, and they say, remember when you had this? Because they don't even remember anymore because they feel so good.
It's true. We quickly forget what seemed like a very horrible thing to be dealing with.
Hmm.
Um, and like once it's gone, you're like, oh, I've always felt fine, And then you look, we have our notes, and you look back and you're like, wait, you said that was like a 10 out of 10. You couldn't deal with it, and you're saying nothing's changed, but so it's funny how the brain and our memories work. They're not very good. They can remember
Right.
things accurately.
Yeah, well, it probably helps us to live our lives much more, joyously when
That's
it's
true.
like that,
If
so
we,
we don't have to suffer endlessly.
yeah, that's called PTSD.
Right, yeah, totally, PTSD. Um, okay, let's shift gears. I would love to talk to you about COVID from the perspective of like moving from surviving to thriving, so to speak.
Mm,
So, I'm sure you've been seeing patients, or have you, we can talk about that have, coming in, and now they've been dealing with just like even with their illness, but this whole kind of like bubble around them, living in their lives, having the stress affect them. And so how do you navigate the road with patients on this new level of, you know, they're new people. We're living in a new environment. And so how are, my direct question, and one at a time, is like, what's this new place going to be? And then navigation moving forward.
yeah, it's been confusing.
Totally.
I mean, like it's very uncertain. I'm rewinding to just a few months ago.
Hmm.
Imagine March, like you start hearing about this thing, this pandemic, or you hear about coronavirus.
Whispers in the air.
Yeah, whispers in the air, and then I think the big theme is uncertainty, which is the
Hmm.
thing that causes us stress.
Right.
Because it was causing me stress. Because as a doctor, you're like, okay, am I supposed to know how to handle this? But it
Mm-hmm.
seems like no one really knew how to handle this.
Yeah, nobody still
Like,
does really.
yeah, the information has changed so rapidly, like day to day. I thought initially this is just going to be like another flu.
Right.
I mean, even now it's questionable, like, is it or is it not, right? There's still uncertainty about the severity of it.
Yeah.
But the way I'm approaching it is I want to use my universal precautions,
Mm-hmm.
like we did in our lab classes. You
Right.
assume there's something that can infect you if you're dealing with a bodily fluid. Like, use your precautions
Mm-hmm.
that are appropriate. So
Exactly.
for the record, like, wear a mask if you're in public, as a precaution. Wash your hands, like things that we
Be
normally do,
smart.
universal precautions. In terms of the psychological, I think the biggest threat is the psychological stress
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of the uncertainty. And even the first couple months, I was having trouble sleeping myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was watching the news, I was trying to read the CDC, I was like looking at our ND forums, like, how do we deal with this? What are we going to do? Is it going to be
Mm-hmm.
bad? And at some point, I had to turn off the information stream.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
what I think is a big self-awareness thing for me was realizing that I'm more like an introverted person, meaning I need my quiet time to process.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no time. I wasn't giving myself any time to digest the information. And I think I see a lot of people stuck in that state of digesting all this information,
Right.
get all worked up, and you don't even give yourself some silence to like process it.
Mm.
And I realized this was a big problem, like how important silence was from reading books like uh, Stillness is a Key
Mm-hmm.
by Ryan Holiday. And he tells stories about like Abraham Lincoln, General Eisenhower, who used silence to make better decisions. Like, they were dealing with very important, uncertain times, like
Yeah.
the Civil War,
Right.
World War. And they didn't necessarily have to be introverts to use silence. So I realized how important it is for us to give ourselves silence in order to like give our nervous system a break, our
Mm-hmm.
brain and our nervous system, which affects our metabolism, right? That's a central computer that sends signals to our cells and what to do. So I kept thinking root cause, and the way I would say someone needs to thrive now more than ever is to include more silence.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be hours, but
Right.
enough. Yeah, just enough to like let your nervous system not have any sensory things to pick up.
Yeah, overload.
Yeah, it's just dealing with the information overload.
Mm.
Um, I think it existed before coronavirus. We're just more aware of it, or I'm
Right.
more aware of it, and how that affects health directly.
Yeah, and I think you hit on some really key topics there because the when we're going inward and taking the time without any distraction, then we can hear ourselves, the message from our like real self about how we can move through the day and with a different perspective, like you were talking about with vibration, different, how am I going to step each forward today from a different place where it's me coming into this space and not the other aspects of me, which are listening to all of the garbage that's coming from, not some of it is true, but we have so many, especially in 2020, so many different things. It's unbelievable, and so tuning it out. And for me, I do 15 minutes meditation every day in the morning. That's my first thing I do. And I just is complete silence. I do it before anybody's up in my house so that it's quiet because that's key for me, is having that time. And like you said, it doesn't need to be hours. Who wants to do that? Nobody. I lived at a yoga center and I would meditate 3 times a day for a long time. And I don't need to do that. I have much more important things to do.
When are you gonna get anything done?
Right. I am busy now. No, but yeah. Like you said, that stillness, and I think of it as, when you see the lake and there's like not even like a ripple on the lake, like that's the kind of like stillness I want in my mind in the morning, to be able to tune out everything else.
Yeah, that's a great image. I mean, I like how you say, like, how do we listen? to ourselves, because I it's humbling to know that we can't. I think we're realizing how little we actually have control over.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
if you try to control what someone does, are they wearing a mask or not wearing a mask? Are they,
Mm,
social distancing or not social distancing? What's our government doing, not doing?
too much.
And then if you're trying to like control what you can't control, you feel out of control and you feel like hopeless.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that stillness is a way for us to like take um, ownership over what we can control and
Mm-hmm.
realize like, all right, this is the way this is what I can do. This is what I can't control. And I think we can operate more from a place of calm
Mm.
than fear or anxiety or hopelessness.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for people listening, for our listener today. It's just to come from that place of being you, just being yourself. And every day is going to be different. Every day is going to be a new challenge. We can't control it. There's just no way. And so if we try to, like you were saying, Aron, it creates too much stress.
Yeah.
But then sometimes we need help from a guided practitioner because sometimes we just like lose, what's the right word? Like, I don't know. We lose the sight for what's going on. Like, I guess you could say that overload again. So many overloads start to come into the picture that we lose sight of who we really are, or who we once were, or who we want to become. All of it.
All the above.
All of the above. Okay, so we know that patients and clients, people, everybody listening has a little bit of an external stress stimuli. And so what do you think, what's your best advice for tools that people can bring in now to help them in this current state, and then moving forward to continue to stay in this place of, of stillness, but I guess, or calm, and that can be your recommendations for meditation or walks in the park or, supplements, anything you want. But let's say your top 5 things you would recommend that people could then bring into their life in this moment and help carry them forward into this new place of thriving.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share like my top 5.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely I've worked my best to practice what I preach. So if I think of like the beginning of the day or even the night before,
Mm.
I like we talked about how do you make sure you go to bed on the right side of the bed so you wake up
Right.
on the right side of the bed. And I will be very conscious. I'm very conscientious of what goes into my mind like the 30 minutes before bed. Like one of the mistakes I was making beginning of COVID was
Mm-hmm.
watching the news reports
Oh God.
right before bed, because like I got to know what's going on. Like, what if I need to flee? Right?
Right. I need to
Crazy.
escape to Mars or
What
something.
do I need to prepare? After a certain point where I realize we're in no immediate danger, I'm like, okay, so I'll listen to an audiobook.
Mm.
Um, right now, I've been listening to Earl Nightingale. He was like a radio broadcaster in the 50s, but he talked a
Oh
lot
wow.
about um, like positive, not just positive thinking, but how to live your best life. Like he did these
Mm.
really long essays,
Mm-hmm.
broadcasted all over the radio. So I'll leave that for 30 to 60 minutes, right? I'll listen to that as I'm going
Mm.
to bed. And our subconscious mind, we realize, picks up a lot more information than our conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of my mentors and coaches uh, who do this. I'm like, why not?
I'll try it too.
Yeah. And then I realized that, okay, I go to bed in a more peaceful state. Then
Mm-hmm.
my sleep is better. So that's number one. Be mindful of what you put into your brain right before you go to bed.
Right. Japanese.
Yeah. Yeah.
Learning a new language. I don't know why I
Yeah.
said
You learn
Japanese,
a
but
new
you can
language.
learn, yeah, learn a new language.
Something that will help you feel
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more calm.
Right.
And when I wake up, I don't look at news or messages or emails for at least like the first 30 minutes of the day.
Yeah.
Because my mind, I realize, is I think it was a biology of belief. Was a doctor, he wrote the biology of belief.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Of I'll remember that, it'll come to me. But he was also saying that our brain is most receptive to input like 30 minutes before you go to bed, 30 minutes after you wake up.
Yeah, so key. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bruce Lipton.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right. Bruce Lipton.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, I need a clean slate to begin the day. So no social media, no email, no fires for the first 30 to 60 minutes. I mean, that's been game changer. Like, it sounds so simple, but those two things alone have made my days start on the right foot.
I do the same thing with music. I put on like super relaxing music before I go to sleep. And then when I wake up, as I'm making my little morning beverage, I put on either some relaxing music, or I'll put on some kind of chanting, or sometimes I'll just like switch it up and put up something like super upbeat, but I do the same thing. No communication, no social media. Like, I'm not brushing my teeth at the podcast. I'm just like, this is my time.
Yep. So exactly, like, so whatever, if you're extroverted and you want loud music, go for it. Like, go do a heavy workout, whatever it is for you. I've been using Heart Math.
Oh yeah.
Heart Math is a biofeedback device, and put it onto your ear. You can track what your nervous system is doing via heart rate variability. So I'll do my breath work, and I can see what my nervous system is doing. And I can see, then I want to also enhance that calm state. So, 10 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, depending on what I need. I'll try to do some movement outside, whether it's walking, like an older gentleman, or I'll go for a run. So just to get my body moving. And then I know that helps me feel more calm afterwards. In terms of what I like to consume, and it's not about what our supplements are, but like reishi is a nice adaptogenic mushroom. Other benefits for your metabolism. So that's something I will take. I think the last thing is just keeping myself around positive people, optimistic people. I think a lot of people are struggling because they're stuck in an environment where some of the people around them aren't on the right vibrational level.
Yeah.
A little bit more anxious, maybe more toxic, and it's a hard realization to like accept. Maybe it's someone really close to you. Maybe it's a parent, brother, sister. So being more conscientious of who you're around and what information you're getting from the people around you is, I think, one of the biggest factors. So I know some of it's not avoidable, but at least trying to give yourself space from those people and spending more time with positive, optimistic, not unrealistic or delusional, but people who are thinking of more like, how do we keep moving forward? How do we make progress?
Yeah. I don't think I'm delusional, and I'm a pretty positive person.
You've always been positive and bubbly, but not delusional.
But not delusional. Not yet, anyway. Ask me in like another 100 years. Because I might still be here. Who knows? Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. I think I could talk to you forever, but let's wrap some things up today. Those are all super great tips. And what I really liked about all the things you said is just really taking the time to tune out and tune in, because that's the key, I think, to all of the health that we've been talking about today, is tuning into yourself, tuning out the external environment, really listening to what your body needs. And especially during this time of shift on the planet, as we're just, an uncertainty, but also it's a new uncertainty. Uncertainty can be exciting. If we look at, that's what I've been trying to myself think about, is how in this new space of uncertainty, how can I make the change and shift my life into a new, like, exciting place, like being in my home office or taking more time walking, or, you know, whatever it may be. Okay, one last more fun question, then we'll do some, we'll talk about how people can find you. Not stalk
I'm
you,
hiding.
but so if you had like this unlimited budget, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the planet?
I would say, think the biggest impact is helping people develop that self-awareness.
Mm.
I don't know exactly what that would look like, because I think it is this journey, but I think probably something helping people get out in nature
Mm.
is a big one. Uh, Maybe redeveloping our environments, like I think people are realizing that the city urban life is not very conducive to feeling that calm.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a lot more people moving out of the city in Seattle or going out into the mountains and going out in nature. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
nature, as naturopaths, maybe this is stereotypical, but I think nature is our greatest teacher.
Yeah, totally.
And if I could get people out in nature more often, get some sun, I that I would say would make people more naturally, help them tune in,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the stuff, other stuff will figure itself out.
That's right. Yeah. I spend every Fridays working at the farm that I work at, and I just love it. Just being able to be with the plants and the energy of the plants and hearing the birds and the creek go by. And it's just, it changes. I like to look forward to it all week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to go work at the farm. But it's a work in a different way because of, you know, nature is so healing. Yeah, that's great. Would, I will give you all the money in the world to do that.
Got it. Thanks.
Got it. You're
Getting to work.
Get to work. Okay, Aron. How can people find you to make an appointment? The best thing to do is to go to your website to learn more about you, watch cool videos.
Yeah, my website, aronchoi.com,
Mm-hmm.
ARONCHOI.com. I also post quite a bit on my Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
actually just even just my personal page.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just look for Aron Choi, you'll see my posts.
Oh, nice. That's
Um,
easy.
I do have I have some podcast episodes. It's called my podcast is The Awkward Silence, and
Talking about silence today. We're in the stillness. Maybe you should change it to the awkward stillness.
the awkward stillness. I like that. Those are kind of the best ways at this point to get in touch with me. You can contact me on my contact page and reach out.
Great, good. And you're accepting patients, you're seeing patients at an office, or you're just doing telemedicine visits right
It's
now?
all virtual. What's
All virtual. Mhm.
interesting is that right before the closures, I actually went virtual. I did
Oh,
not plan it this
you didn't
way.
plan
It just
it.
I was planting the seeds for a while to make
Yeah,
that
perfect.
move.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now everyone's like, before it was like, oh, I don't know how I can do it. And
Right.
now everyone, oh, now we have to do it.
No, everybody wants
So
to do it.
it's like, all right.
Yeah, yeah. I've had some patients say that they like it better because they can be, you know, in their pajamas or they can whatever they want to be doing.
They don't have to drive an hour into Seattle or
Right. And
whatever.
yeah, yeah, Seattle traffic. And I have patients that come from that live far away all over the world. So it's great. I love it. And I can be in my pajamas. I don't, but I could be. Okay, good. And the only thing we didn't talk about was your programs. Would you like to briefly mention some of the metabolic programs that you're doing?
Yes. So I've done a lot of one-on-one work with the metabolic reset. So
Mm-hmm.
um, one, working on the food piece, how to eat, when to eat, what to eat, but also talking a lot about how self-care fits into our metabolism.
Mm.
And so it's a guided process, 7 weeks, and I'll be launching another group coming up in I think probably early September.
Ooh,
So
perfect
keep an eye
timing.
out for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen some really a lot of self-awareness develop through going through a process. It's not for people who are like, I'm not committed to making no change. I want to do whatever I want. Just
Yeah.
to be very upfront, like I just interviewed someone who went through it, and she had said you have to make the decision first to want, or you feel like this is the time to do something for your health.
Mm-hmm.
Then the process becomes worth it, because it's not
Right.
always easy to make a change,
That's
but it
right.
is a very proven system to like get a result, whether that's
Yeah.
to lose a little bit of weight, decrease inflammation, just to feel overall better and make better life decisions.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to sign up.
Come on in.
Yeah, woo! Okay, great. Thanks, Aron, so much. It's been such a joy and pleasure to have you on as my guest today. And I look forward to having you back. I see a book in your future, so we'll be talking about that, I think.
It's on my to-do list. Yeah.
Oh,
But
spark, a little spark light bulb went off.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
so happy that we got to catch up after years. You were one of the very first people I met at Bastyr. I don't know if you remember. I think it was like one of the first days I was there, and then I met you and Dave, and uh, that's 10 years ago now.
I know. It's crazy. It's really crazy. We're completely different people, yet the same.
Exactly. More evolved.
More evolved. Okay, thanks, Aron.
Thanks, Lulu.